Good afternoon, everybody. If you love HOAs, you're in the right place. If you're interested in HOAs, you're in the right place. And if you're not interested in HOAs, you're still in the right place, because we're going to talk about how to convert HOAs into climate action superheroes. And as most of you know, every superhero has a secret origin story. And we are so new in this industry, climate action, of engaging HOAs, that you're actually sitting in part of the secret origin story just by being here today. You'll be able to tell your grandchildren you were there when this started. I'm Jerry Tinianow. I'm the proprietor of Western Urban Sustainability Advisors based in Denver. We advise local governments on sustainability and climate planning based on my 7 years as Denver's first Chief Sustainability Officer. The other panels are up here in the order in which they'll present. We have Gabrielle Fuerst, who's with CAP Management, also based in Denver. She is, we believe, the only staff member of any HOA management company in the country who has the title of a Sustainability Director. Next to her is Lizzie Peyton from Big Sky Big Sky Sustainable Network Organization, the Executive Director of that group. She's going to talk about how her group has incorporated HOA engagement into implementation of their climate action plan. And then finally, Emma Lawler, project manager with the Big Sky Owner Association, actual HOA, and she's going to talk about the work they've been doing within their HOA to get the HOA involved with what we would call climate action and sustainability. But enough about us. Let me ask a few questions of you, because we want to see who's in the audience. I'm going to ask some very quick yes/no questions. Raise your hand in response to the question if it applies to you. So my first question is, how many people in the audience today live or have lived in a property that is managed by an HOA? So yeah, a lot of hands up. That's great. Of those people, how many of you have served in a management capacity? You've been on the board, you've been an officer, you've served on a committee, and things like that. So a fair amount. That's great. Let me turn to a different direction. How many of you in your capacity, current or former, as a local government official or employee, how many of you have reached out, dealt with an HOA for any reason, any topic at all? Great, that's good. Now, of those, how many of you have reached out to an HOA for something having to do with what we would call climate action or sustainability? Okay, a little bit fewer. And of those, the last question, how many of you got what you wanted? So we're seeing almost no hands raised, which does not surprise us. What is an HOA? And that's where we start this conversation. For a lot of people out there in the public, HOAs are kind of monsters. You know, oh my God, I have to go to the HOA to get permission to do something. Or, oh my God, I did something and the HOA is going to find out about it and they're going to be down my throat. And for others, people take a little less jaded view of the HOA, but still it's kind of a negative thing, you know? But really, HOAs are just groups of people who own property in a particular area who come together to make their properties collectively better. They want to make sure that the people who bought into their community get what they thought they were buying into. And so really, you know, that it's something where a group that we can work with. Remember yesterday when the keynote speaker talked about the importance of being involved in local government elections, not just the national election? Well, that also applies to HOAs because they govern too. And so, you know, it's appropriate to look at their elections because they can have a substantial influence on what you're doing in your community on climate action. Give you a few fun facts about HOAs. First of all, over 75 million Americans currently live in a community that's managed by an HOA. That's about 30% of all of the US housing stock is governed by an HOA, and that number is growing all of the time. You know, this is the fastest form of private governance, and this is an important point. HOAs are private governance. They don't have all of the authorities of a local government, but they have many of the authorities of a local government. They make decisions about things like waste collection, landscaping, water usage, parking, what type of energy structures can or cannot go on the buildings, and so forth. So they are the fastest growing form of private governance because, let's face it, there aren't a lot of new governments being created at the local level anymore. But there's a lot of HOAs being created all the time. And I would guess that within these mountain towns, the percentage of properties under HOA management is much higher than 30%, much higher than the national average. So these are very important players in terms of what does or does not happen with greenhouse gas reduction in your community. It's different depending on what state you're in. You know, in California, there's heavy regulation at the state level of HOAs. If you go to someplace like Montana, there's a lot less regulation of HOAs. So if you're going to deal with HOAs in your community, be sure you know what the state regulation is or is not. HOAs can have a great effect on greenhouse gas emissions in your community for the reasons I just mentioned, all the different things that they can regulate. And it's important to keep in mind that they can have a lot of influence both for good and for bad. So they have the potential to really promote a lot of the practices in energy and water usage and plants and traffic and parking and so forth. They can influence a lot of that, but they can also shut things down. It's not unusual for an HOA, for example, to have a rule that says you can't put solar on the roof, or you're only allowed to have certain plants. You can't do native landscaping. So they can be forces for good. They can also be forces for bad. And finally, you know, there's not been very much effort among HOAs until recently to even get involved in the sustainability space or to get involved in climate action. That's why I said earlier that this is part of the origin, the secret origin story. What our three panelists are going to talk about, what they've been doing, it's part of the secret origin of creating HOA superheroes. We're right at the beginning right now. And so before we launch into the specifics, I do want to call your attention to this one statement up here, which was made 10 years ago by the Foundation for Community Association Research, kind of the research arm of the HOA industry. And if this statement looks familiar to you, particularly if you're someone like me who's been doing this work for quite a while, this looks like another version of jobs versus the environment, right? You know, this is where sustainability started. There's a tension between jobs and the environment, and you can choose one or you can choose the other, but you can't choose both. As sustainability professionals, we know that that's not true. We know that sustainability, in fact, as a concept, developed to resolve that, to show that you can actually have win-win instead of win-lose. But it's important to know that in dealing with HOAs, many of them start out with the thought up here that they have to choose between what's right for their community and what's right for the climate and the environment. Now, as we go through the presentation this afternoon, we are going to, and I'm pretty confident we will be able to, leave about 20 minutes at the end for questions, comments, or even criticism. You know, we all have tough skins. We can take the pushback. If you have other ideas, if we're on the wrong course, let us know. And I will also say that as we go through this presentation, some of the slides will have QR codes on them. And that's because those QR codes will lead you to resources which our panelists are willing to share with you freely. You can download them, you can copy them, you can put your own brand on them if you'd like. You know, we want to share freely. So Chris Steinkamp said yesterday, one of the big purposes of this conference is to share good ideas, good practices, and good tools among mountain towns. You know, at WestUrb, we believe that sustainability for a mountain town is an export industry. Not only because we deal with each other, but because we deal with people from all other places. So take advantage of those QR codes. At the end, we will put the introduction slide back up again, but this time we'll have contact information on it if you want to reach out to any of us. And with that, let me turn it over to Gabrielle.
Thanks, Jerry. Hi, everyone. My name is Gabrielle Fuerst. I am the Chief Sustainability Officer of CAP Management. We are an HOA management company, and we are based in Denver, and most of our properties fall in Colorado. Actually, 100% of our properties are in Colorado. A handful of them are in mountain towns. And at CAP Management, this really is,
Press the big green button.
press the big green button. That should have been easier. So I'm going to follow up with what Jerry was talking about. What actually is an HOA? Obviously, we all kind of have these preconceived notions of what an HOA is, and we're going to talk about some of the barriers to sustainability in them. So what is an HOA? There are kind of three big parts of an HOA. One of them is that every member of an association or of a community is a member and is required to pay dues. Every HOA is different. We manage mostly multifamily in Denver, but we'll be talking about some single-family communities that we've been working in. So dues can fluctuate. They can be monthly, they can be annually, they can be really large, they can be, $100 a year. The next part of it is governing documents. So there are bylaws, articles of incorporation, your decks, your rules and regulations that regulate what homeowners are and are not allowed to do, both in their unit and outside of in the association generally, in the common areas. Again, with single-family homes, sometimes those common areas are mostly just roads, light posts, mailboxes, if there's one shared area for that. But in our multifamilies, there's, the roof is considered a common area. The lobby is considered a common area. So the association's funds are used to upkeep those common elements, which is why often in single-family communities, dues are much cheaper than in a multifamily community, because there's just less to upkeep. And then the third part of it is there's a board of directors. And the board of directors is a volunteer group. People do not get paid for it, and it can vary, sometimes 3 people, sometimes 5, sometimes 7. We've seen up to 9 members. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of differing opinions in HOAs generally, but also on the board. And board members, what we often find is there's a lot of pressure on board members to make the right decisions on behalf of the community, which can be a lot of pressure for a very small percentage of that ownership to make decisions. And what we find is that board members don't always feel confident doing so. And so what they'll do is they'll get information, get bids, get more bids. And a lot of times those decisions stall, and then we have board turnover, so then all of that institutional knowledge is lost. And sometimes it's hard to get people even on the board. This puts management companies like ourselves in tough positions because we don't have the ability to act on behalf of the community. We just take the board's direction. So when boards are really indecisive, it can delay the upkeep of the community. And what we find a lot is that, and this is not true of every HOA, but in a lot of HOAs nowadays, a lot of present community members are dealing with the ramifications of board members 20 years ago not choosing to invest in getting their roof replaced or getting their water lines fixed. And so now there's a lot of what we call deferred maintenance in the industry, and it puts a lot of pressure on today's residents to raise the money for things that should have been fixed 10 years ago. So sustainability has a very specific and exciting role to play in HOAs because they have such tremendous buying power. There are a lot of people there pooling their resources, already paying money every month, and so you have the ability to hire great landscapers who focus on native plants, or you have the ability to focus on maybe paving the parking lot with a permeable pavement, perhaps. So there's a lot of money that HOAs have the ability to use, but the problem that we see, like I said with the deferred maintenance part, is getting homeowners associations to switch from the short-term mindset to the long-term mindset, which, as you all know, is the crux of sustainability. A lot of these things require upfront investment, but they'll pay themselves back in 7, 8, 9 years, depending on whatever the improvement is. And so we find this is the biggest challenge, and something that has come out of this conference the whole time is education. It comes down to education all the time. So we just gotta make sure our homeowners understand the financial payback associated with these, and oftentimes when you can make the numbers case, you can get them. So how do you make change in a homeowners association? Like Jerry mentioned, sometimes there's law or rules against installing solar panels on your roof, or sometimes there's rules against having certain kinds of landscaping, as we know. So there's 2 ways you can kind of go about this. There's the governing documents, which I talked about before. You can amend these. It It takes a very long time. These are legal documents that are provided to the government, so you have to get them updated, reviewed by a lawyer. Usually a lawyer is very involved in the whole process, and then you have to resubmit them to, for us, it's the Department of Regulatory Agencies, but whichever regulatory agencies require HOAs to give their governing documents. Not only that, but it could require a percentage of homeowner vote, which is very difficult to sometimes get because not a lot of people attend board meetings. So that is already a hurdle in and of itself. So the way we like to recommend people make change in their communities is through committees. Committees are just a couple, it could just be a couple interested homeowners, the people in your community that are most excited about sustainability, and they do the research. They're the ones that provide recommendations to the board. And what we find is that this alleviates some of the stress from the board to make all of the right decisions, and it spreads out the decision-making power a bit. And I think that that's it. So Lizzie will talk about an event that we all hosted together earlier this year, but this was a survey that we sent out before that event, trying to get people's insight on what sorts of things are barriers in your community to sustainability from your perspective. And these are things that come up all the time. These seem to be, consistent across all HOAs, is there's lack of homeowner education around sustainability. They don't know what it is. They don't know the benefits. They don't recognize that even a project that isn't branded as sustainability, but maybe it saves water or saves energy, that is already a sustainability project. You're just not thinking of it that way. Lack of homeowner interest, lack of personnel is a big one. Having a full-time employee dedicated to it, like through the management company like we do at CAP, or as Emma will talk about, like there's staff at some other HOAs where they have full staffs, and that can sometimes make the biggest difference in getting these things over the finish line. And then competing financial priorities. Like I said, there's always things to fix in an HOA, so choosing to put your money towards sustainability versus, getting a prettier parking lot or whatever it is, that can be tough. So this is sort of the culmination of all of the work that we've been doing at CAP regarding HOA sustainability. We created this sustainability certification framework. So it's similar to how you could get a singular building LEED certified or WELL certified, but this certification is for associations at large, because associations have specific things that not a lot of other organizations deal with, like the financials and the governance. If you don't have a good reserve, then you won't be able to invest in sustainability projects. If you don't have board meetings that enable most of the community members to come at the right time of day, if it's during the school drop-off hours or whatever, changing your meeting times and changing the way you guys govern to make sure that people can attend is huge. And then this framework, it's impossible to expect an HOA to tackle a sustainability project in all four of these categories. So we've created it so that you really only have to dive into one of the environmental sustainability tracks to get certified. So that's waste management, transportation, water, and energy. And like I said, we're going to provide all of these resources afterwards, and I'd be happy to continue to talk about it. But now I will pass it over to Lizzie.
You might notice that I don't really look like the picture up there because my hair's a lot longer. So it is me, I swear. My name is Lizzie. I'm the director for Big Sky Snow, which stands for Sustainability Network Organization. If you don't already know, Big Sky is an unincorporated community. So that means we basically have very little central jurisdiction or enforcement in our community. So we kind of bring a bunch of nonprofits together to work together and create solutions that a traditional municipality would usually work on. Our mission is to preserve and protect the Big Sky community by advancing environmental and sustainability initiatives. And through greenhouse gas emissions reporting, we've noted that about 2/3 of our community emissions come from infrastructure, primarily buildings, both commercial and residential. They're about 30% each. So we realized really quickly that a great way to reduce our emissions in our community was by working with HOAs and POAs to create a space for solutions that were really incentive-based. This is what came out of our greenhouse gas emissions reports that we do. We produced a climate action plan in 2023. This is our trail map to net zero emissions as a community. Unlike a lot of other communities here, we have a 2050 goal. Again, that goes back to the fact that we're unincorporated and we have no enforcement mechanisms. So it's really actually getting everybody on board to do the right thing is a key part of this. Note that this trail has 13 different strategies listed under 4 different targeted improvement priorities, similar to Gabrielle's pyramid, and they are not necessarily happening one step at a time. They're actually happening simultaneously, depending on community partnership, buy-in, and engagement. So it's really important for us to have partnerships with people like Emma at the Big Sky Owners Association so we can make sure to advance these goals together with collective action. I don't know how many of you people in the audience have been to Japan. Okay, so this is a picture of Shibuya Crossing. And whenever I think of collective action in our community, and you probably feel this same way, even though you might have enforcement mechanisms, is that people are all going all different directions. The way I like to think of snow as an educational body that kind of acts as like the lady who helps you cross the street together. So that's kind of what we try to do, is create resources for different demographics in the community to engage in a sustainable manner, meeting them where they're at. As Jerry mentioned, I'm gonna have a few QR codes on the next few slides. But what we've done is basically, as an organization, created multiple resources for different sectors of our community. With the Owners Association, we actually did a great workshop this spring. Gabrielle brought up our survey that we sent out to attendees. We actually had almost 60 people attend. We have over 100 HOAs in Big Sky. So it's kind of bananas, but really fun to engage with everybody. Luckily, somebody like Emma runs BSOA, and a bunch of smaller owners associations fall underneath that. So when we get with the Master Owners Association, it can really affect more people than you'd think. We had a full afternoon at the Wilson Hotel where we talked about a bunch of solutions with breakout sessions and had great community engagement. The resources from that were on the QR code. The QR code here is another resource that Snow is producing. Again, why is a 501c3 in this space? We, along with our fire department, the Gallatin River Task Force, which is our water conservation nonprofit, and Grow Wild, which is our invasive species nonprofit, actually got together and collaborated on an online resource that implements fire-wise, water-wise, and ecosystems-friendly landscaping in one place. Something really cool that's happening is that this is not only a tool for your homeowner, but we actually have one of the largest developers in the community rewriting their landscape design guidelines based on alpinscapes. We collaborated with them, and that basically affects a lot of the area of Big Sky as a whole. Additionally, we've had actually multiple landscape artists reach out to us as a local knowledge base, because people in Big Sky, as I'm sure is happening in your community, they're actually hiring people from further afield to come in and do work in your community. So it's allowing for some of your subcontractors to all get on the same page and understand what we're trying to accomplish collectively in our community. We also just launched Build Better Big Sky a few weeks ago. This is another online platform that goes to energy conservation and efficiency, wildfire adaptedness, water conservation, and sustainable materials. All of this is trying to be an entry-level space for people to start getting comfortable with the fact that there are resources there, and moving your needle towards more sustainable action doesn't need to feel insurmountable. So it's really important from our perspective, because we don't have enforcement, to create all of these go-to resources for our community members. And then we also will continue with the Owners Association Sustainability Workshop. So this fall, what we did to try to not ask too much of people's time is that we did an online three-course Owners Association Sustainability Workshop. So for 3 Wednesdays throughout the month of October, we're hosting topic-specific events that were identified in our post-survey from our April workshop. So that's home hardening. Big Sky is actually at a greater risk than 96% of communities in the United States for a catastrophic wildfire event. If you've not been there, we also have one road in and one road out. Scares the pants off of me every damn day. The second one was based towards commercial energy. We have CPACE as a tool in our state. How many of you guys have CPACE in your states? Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy? Okay, cool. In Montana, we call it capital enhancement instead of clean energy. We could not say clean energy. And yeah, it's a thing. But that was really cool because we invited someone from Bridger Brewing who built a structure in Three Forks with a utility district that they actually created an entire water utility district from CPACE funding, and they have a 1-to-1 ratio of water to beer. And if any of you have ever worked in fermentation, you realize just how much water is used to clean things. So it's really remarkable. Their purple pipe system was fully funded by CPACE financing. They're actually going to create workforce housing from it and a community daycare. So really cool opportunities to take that money they're saving and put it into other community-led initiatives. And then next Wednesday, we'll actually do a landscaping and water conservation conversation with our Alpenscapes partners and also with the Big Sky Water and Sewer District. Our goal is to continuously make Big Sky a great place to live. So we do that a lot with these partnerships. And on that note, I'm excited to pass it to our partner, Emma.
Hi, everybody. You ready for the grand finale? My name's Emma Lawler. I'm the project manager with Big Sky Owners Association. So just a little bit about our Masters Owners Association. We have been managing and operating the unincorporated community of Big Sky for 50 years, over 50 years now. We operate as a quasi-governmental entity. We manage over 8,000 acres in Big Sky, which is over 2,400 property owners. And so our mission is to preserve, protect, and enhance property value. Ooh, that was, sorry, I just put a laser on someone. So some of our services are just as Gabby was describing. We manage roads, rural improvement districts, signage, lighting, open space management. We have over 70 acres of open space that is for the public in perpetuity. And then, of course, covenant compliance, that's where the Karen thing comes in. But I like to think of our HOA as the opposite of a Karen. What would that be, like Lindas? We're a bunch of Lindas. And then architectural review, and that's really where the sustainability component comes in. I'll just give a background of how our HOA started engaging in the sphere of sustainability. There was a huge concern with the rapid growth of development. I'm sure all of your mountain communities are sort of facing the same thing. And so we really wanted to just focus on the low-hanging fruit with property owners who may not be familiar at all with stewardship and sustainability. So a couple of the things that we did to get started on that, it really was the board's initiative. It was a group of passionate people who were seeing these impacts, water, wildfire, our wildlife, our noxious weeds. They formed a sustainability committee, and then they hired staff that have an expertise in sustainability. And so that was formed in 2021, so very new initiatives here. We began a pilot non-invasive wildlife study, so the photos that you're seeing are from our game cameras. We are trying to catalog an area, a really sensitive area. We have reason to believe that it's a wildlife migration corridor that's slated for development. So we want to just take inventory of what's going on down there, and we've had over 500 sightings in the last year from those game cameras. And then we created a best practices guidebook, so I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then, of course, we're always participating. We feel that we have a pretty strong voice in the sphere of like commissioners and planning boards to comment on incoming developments that would further impact our natural resources. So this is our mission statement. This is just an example of, I mean, this is our mission statement, but this is a real life example that you all may be able to take away and bring to your HOA. This is what we are working on. It's really focused on water usage, an introduction for new homeowners to renewable energy, pollution, and just reducing impact to our beautiful community of Big Sky. So I will talk now a little bit about our design regulations, which this is where the architectural review component comes in. We spent the last 3 years updating and modernizing our design regulations. So we worked with the Sustainability Committee and the Architectural Review Committee to really build out like a more robust fire mitigation section in our design regulations, minimizing water use in landscaping. I have to say, like, I wasn't at the BSOA in the early 2000s, but they were asking homeowners to actually install more irrigated turf lawn, which we all are sort of gravitating away towards irrigated turf lawn, and that's really what Alpenscapes is promoting. And so we really are encouraging owners to have a native landscape plan. And then we simultaneously worked on our best practices. And so with the design regulations, that is a regulatory document. And the best practices is a suggestion, it's an encouragement for owners. It's an introduction for folks who may not know where to even start. All right, and so these focus areas, I like to think of them as gateways into climate action. You have your 4 W's there: water, wildfire, weeds, and wildlife. There is a section in our best practices on localized energy and renewable energy. One of the things that we did in our design regulations was loosen the restrictions on solar, included ground-mounted solar, and then mentioned geothermal, just making sure if you are going to have geothermal that you have some sort of plan to know where your geothermal is at in your landscaping. And so, and I should mention that that QR code was to the best practices, but I also have hard copies with me. If you guys are interested, please feel free to come talk to me after. And then I will just go into some of the barriers we are facing in the sphere of encouraging stewardship and sustainability and climate action. So, of course, a lot of our homeowners are second homeowners, third homeowners. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. Some of them spend 3 months out of the year, and it's usually the ski season, and they don't ever really get to see their landscaping in the summer. And they have irrigated turf lawn, like I said. I'm like very anti-grass, if you can't tell. And then our legal authority is really bound by our covenants and bylaws. So we cannot force everybody to switch their home to renewable energy. We can't force people to update their interior appliances. We actually cannot go inside the home at all. It's really like exterior and aesthetics for the most part, but we do play a role in like the fire mitigation, the landscape plan type thing. And then of course, staff capacity is a huge barrier. There's one of me and a team of 6, and we're all pretty bogged down with over 2,400 property owners. And then as we are talking about boards and board agendas, there are differing opinions among the board, and protecting, the membership dues and the reserves and what we spend money on, what we cannot spend money on. And then, of course, our jurisdictional boundaries. So, yes, we are 8,000 acres in Big Sky, but we are just one Masters Owners Association among private ski clubs and other HOAs that we are not above. And then some of the lessons that we've learned in this process is we've actually had really positive community buy-in. So, people have picked up a copy from our Office of the Best Practices. They're so excited that we're starting to promote this education to owners. A lot of our owners are from different parts of the country, so that's really exciting. And then, of course, like this carrot and the stick approach, we don't want to fine people for doing something wrong. We really want to encourage, and a carrot, I guess an example of like reward would be, we'll waive your review fee if you rip out that turf lawn. And then HOAs, they operate as a hyper-local government, so like, or just like a hyper-local body. So if there's advocacy and you really wanna see change, start with your HOA. And of course, we are here for you. We work for you guys. So definitely lean into your HOA. Pop into a board meeting, mention it, because those board members are dying to hear feedback from the membership. And I just want to say really quick, full circle, Mountain Towns 2030. I don't think Tanya Anderson is in the room, but shout out to Tanya Anderson, because I met her in Vail at the Mountain Towns 2030 in Vail, and she showed me this publication that Teton County came out with, which is the Good Neighbor Handbook. And that really, really inspired this whole process of creating the best practices publication. So with that, I will open up the floor.
Thank you very much. Get that, thanks. Yeah, thank you very much. I did promise to give you our contact information, but what you also see on this slide is a little line at the bottom that says, write down one action you will walk away and implement. Now, we're not going to collect those forms. So they're between you and yourself. And that action can be anything from, you've already had these interactions with HOAs, you have a particular idea of when you're going to approach, or it could be something as simple as, I'm going to start learning more about HOAs. I'm going to learn what my state regulations do and do not permit HOAs to do. Whatever it is, as we're going through the Q&A, we have a little over 20 minutes, please feel free to write down whatever that idea is that you have about next steps. Now, we're calling this question and answer, but really it's not just questions and answers. As I said, if you like what you're hearing, let us know. If you don't like, if we're on the wrong, of course, we are tough people. It's hard to really make us feel bad. Not impossible, but hard. Push back, talk with each other. Maybe you have a story that you'd like to share about an experience you've had with an HOA. But you're by now familiar with these boxes, so I'm going to, rather than waiting for someone to ask a question, if one of you folks in the front row, can I throw this to one of you, and then you can kind of, because you're kind of in the center. Can you take it? There you go. Okay. Yeah. I'm also going to send one way. I don't think I can throw one up there all the way, but I'm going to throw one towards the back there, and then maybe one of you can throw it back here. Okay, ready? Well, there you go. Yeah, so if we have a question up there, you should, or maybe you can already kind of heave it up there and someone will grab it. Okay.
I got a question. I'm on the board of my local HOA here in Jackson, which has been an incredibly frustrating experience. And our bylaws, the majority of them were put into place more than 20 years ago, and I would argue the community no longer reflect the needs of the community today. The other side of that story is that people who bought into the neighborhood 10, 15, 20 years ago bought into it with a certain expectation that was represented by those bylaws. I'm just wondering, how do you navigate those two? I don't know if that question makes sense, but how do you navigate those two things? On the one hand, you have, I believe that the bylaws are meant to be sort of an evolving document that reflect a changing community, and then on the other hand, you have people that bought into the community with certain expectations that are reflected by those bylaws.
Yeah, that's a great question. Bylaws are going to be difficult to change. I would not necessarily consider bylaws a living document. They're usually pretty set in stone. So that is something that you would want to engage with your lawyer, your representation on. And start to redraft them. I'm not sure what the laws are like here in Wyoming, but depending on what kind of regulation it comes down from the state level, it might be more difficult to amend those. What you can do, and what we have tried to take the approach with, and Emma kind of talked about this, is strongly suggesting stuff through rules and regulations. Actually, something that Emma and I have talked about is the shall, that word shall. You can suggest things through some sort of past regulation about, the owner shall update their in-unit light bulbs with LEDs, but you can't mandate it, so it's tough. So if your bylaws are really restrictive and the community has buy-in, I would recommend trying to, engaging in a really long, years-long process to get a committee involved and amend them.
I'll throw something out, that a visioning exercise for the people who live here now of what kind of community they want to see going forward, and then write a mission and vision statement might be a way to bypass the bylaws and get people's buy-in on, hey, where do we want to go? We want to get away from turf grass. We want to go native. And broad generalities. We want to encourage everybody to move to heat pumps. That might be an easier way than trying to move around archaic legal documents.
And that comment, by the way, was from Chris Krigler, who is the founder and CEO of CAP Management, and he was the one who decided that they were going to expand their business model to include sustainability. So he was there first, part of the secret origin. Any other comments on that question? Okay, next question. Okay. Speak.
No?
Yeah.
Jackson Hole has a wide variety of homeowners associations, from, decrepit condo complexes that are tens of years to literally the most wealthy people in the world. I know Big Sky is the same thing. We know from data that it is, that consumption is linked to wealth. So those wealthier people, as a general rule, generalization, consume more, emit more greenhouse gas emissions. I would posit that they are also the least likely to be interested in engaging with a community effort to green homeowners associations. And I'm curious whether you all have found that to be the case or not, because I'm thinking, as we invest the time to engage homeowners associations, have you found consistent patterns in these types of homeowners associations are excited to work with us, and we have not had any luck with this kind of category? So would be curious what your guidance is on that.
Great question, Margie. So we are actually really fortunate in that with our small community and being a bit of a company town with Lone Mountain Land Company owning 3 of the largest pieces of property, I think it's probably like 45,000 acres in aggregate between the Yellowstone Club, Spanish Peaks, and Moonlight Basin, that we actually have had really good luck engaging with them. We had many of the homeowners attend, and because Lone Mountain Land is kind of the parent company of all of them, as they amend their design regulations, when one goes, it's a pretty quick domino effect. For example, 3 years ago, I actually approached the president of the YCPOA, the Yellowstone Club POA, to ask about what their water consumption was. And what a practice we went through is that we went through addressing who the top 25, he used the word offenders, but maybe that's not the most diplomatic word. The top 25 utilizers of water, why don't we go ahead and reach out to them directly and see if they're even aware that they're using that much water. And within a calendar year, there was 2 million gallons of water conserved from just nice conversations that were not like, you suck. They were more like, are you aware that this is what you're paying for water? Step number 1, because most of them have assistants who are paying their bills, so they are not aware. And number 2, how much of a community's resource you're using in your second, third, fourth home, whatever it may be. So we are fortunate in that sense, and we do feel like we have a very good relationship with them, but that didn't occur without time. And I think from Emma's perspective with BSOA, they range from like very large to very like the cheapest. So she might be able to talk if there's been any pushback anywhere else.
Yeah, like the hill condos in Big Sky are one of the most affordable. However, these owners probably bought their unit back in like early 2000s for $30,000 and now they're worth $500,000. And so they're not super interested in any kind of like involvement in sustainability or anything like that. But we're trying to set an example. We have a broad range of sub-associations beneath us. Aspen Groves is a great example. They always show out for community chipping days. It's a very heavily treed area, and so we really try and work with that sub-HOA, for example, for fuels mitigation and things like that. And so, yeah, it's kind of it's interesting that like the upper echelon is a little more conscientious of their consumption.
And I would just follow up with saying that our best tact with that, Margie, was really going at it from like let's talk to the POA president, and then let's come from like a friendly place and ask them, are they aware, instead of coming in hot with blame. Because in our community, the same as yours, there is a lot of negative sentiment between the haves and the have-nots. So when you come in with you have something and you're overutilizing it, we haven't found it to be incredibly effective in a diplomatic situation.
And I want to supplement what Lizzie and Emma just said, because a year ago, Lizzie and I went around to a number of the HOAs in Big Sky to interview them as part of starting this process, starting the Secret Origins story. And I asked two questions of each property manager. One was, what percentage of the members of your association are year-round residents? And the second question was, what is the level of interest in sustainability in your community right now? And what we found, because we got a whole range of different answers, but what we found was the communities that had the highest percentage of year-round residents were also the ones that had the highest level of interest in sustainability. Kind of makes sense, really. But if I'm, a town that has not gone down this road and are thinking about next steps, I would start with HOAs that have the highest percentage of year-round residents, because that is probably where the sentiment, or at least the openness to sustainability, is most likely to be found at the beginning. Okay, other questions? Yeah, upstairs there.
If not, I can
He's
shout.
got a baseball hat on.
Oh, it did? There it is. Okay. Hi, my name is Kim Schlepfer. I live in Avon, Colorado, and I am on an HOA board. And I think the biggest thing that I've found is I've been able to make some small progress here and there. One thing that is the biggest barrier in my mind is the availability of workforce to give a crap about a local HOA. And the example I'll give is we've been trying to zero-scape our landscaping for the last 2 years. In the spring, we have our landscape company come out. They walk the property. They're like, this is what you can do. This last year, we even had our water district come out. We talked about rebates. We had this whole great plan. We asked for a quote. Month goes by, no quote. 2 months, no quote. 3 months, no quote. End of the season, we don't have a quote. And it's because this landscaper got too busy. I believe 90% of their other clients are probably the mansions at the top of Beaver Creek that they're managing. And they have a lot of responsibility and pressure to make sure that those landscapes look nice. And so we get forgotten. And I think that, to me, seems like an insurmountable problem, and I just don't know the way around it. We've reached out to other landscapers. Everyone's just as busy. So, we've got the motivation, we've got the money, we've got the rebates. And now it's just like a workforce issue. So I'm curious if you guys have run into that, if you have any ideas on how to work around that or get better commitment from the contractors that we hire for our HOA to actually help us advance some of these projects.
Outsource to gypsum. No, I don't know if that's feasible, but I, as a project manager, I run into that all the time, not necessarily with landscape projects, but with like road construction and concrete work and stuff like that. So we've had to outsource to like Billings for some of our work. I would try regionally if it's at all possible. I know it may or may not be a little more expensive, but keep that momentum going and always keep that plan like in the back burner, and definitely try and ask outside of Avon if you can. or Eagle.
So we've certainly asked, like, I mean, our whole valley is kind of connected by workforce. So
Okay,
that's
yeah.
definitely been in the equation. So unfortunately, just seems like there's a gap.
Are you self-managed, or do you have a management company?
We have a management company. I wouldn't say that they're rock stars, but they
Yeah.
exist.
The only other thing I would suggest is just maybe reaching out to your management company on which vendors they work with consistently and who they recommend, because they're meant to be there for a resource for you. So that's the other thing.
We're also in the market for maybe a new management company, so we'd love to chat.
Makes sense.
And Lizzie, correct me if I'm wrong, but as you were developing Build Better Big Sky, you were reaching out, you were already looking for the contractors who might be interested in doing this work. I can't remember if you actually listed them in the back, but that's kind of tricky, particularly when you're a town government. If you start, saying, well, these are the people who can do the work, and then someone hires one of those people and they're not very good, they're going to come back to you. So you have to be very careful about how you do that. But I think you did something like that as part of that.
Yeah, so because Build Better Big Sky was literally launched like 2 weeks ago, we are getting we have a vendor feedback list basically to be on, I'm calling it vendor, not contractor, because some people get confused with builders, but we're asking builders, architects, engineers, subcontractors, landscapers to all actually input their information so we can have a suggested contractor tile to vet them. Our process is actually going to be, and this doesn't apply to you in Avon, and so therefore I'm sorry. It's more of a Montana thing, and we are working actually with a statewide Montana coalition called Electrify Montana to duplicate this, so it's going to be statewide. But we are doing a bit of a suggested contractor list. So people do have a place to go to find that. We have about 15 contractors on there right now, and I'm going to be ready to put it up when it's like 20 to 30, so it doesn't look paltry. But our goal is to grow it over to over 100 contractors in the first year. Also cross-promoting it with our DEQ rebate program, which is probably similar to a rebate program you're working on with your landscaping. So I'm sorry I don't have an answer for Avon specifically.
We have about 5 minutes left. There's a question over here.
Is this working? Oh, there we go. I continue to see insurability being a challenge in mountain communities, and my question is that driving behavioral change, particularly among the audience that is resistant to change? And,
yes.
And if so, are you seeing it have an impact on insurability, kind of coming full circle on that?
That's a great question, and it's something we didn't even touch on, and I keep thinking about it in these, so thank you for asking it. It is having an impact on action, and actually with all 3 low mountain land properties, Yellowstone Club, Spanish Peaks, and Moonlight Basin, they actually have changed over their design regulations immediately to basically have everybody convert immediately. So they have people who have put on roofs that are cedar shake roofs 2 years ago, and they have to now convert to fireproof. Again, back to our statistic, we're 96% greater risk than other communities in the United States for wildfire. We are losing insurers like flies. We have 3 insurers in Big Sky now, and that is it. One's discussing leaving again, so we might be down to 2. So home hardening is a huge factor, and then also creating defensible space. Wildfire is our driver. Maybe in other communities there may be floodplain conversations. We're not there. But the insurance piece is actually one of the drivers to get a lot of people to come for the rest of our conversation, right? So we actually kind of drive with the wildfire piece to some extent because it is what it's affecting most homeowners. And when you think about what you mentioned, kind of like the full lineage, like, are we coming for full circle yet? I would say that we are like somewhere right in the weird middle. That's the answer there. There have been, I think, right now, in the YCPOA this summer, they did 60 roofs. Moonlight was 20. Spanish Peaks was another 15. I don't know, Emma, if you're keeping track of how many are happening in BSOA. But that's just roofs alone. That's like the first thing they're coming after as insurers because cedar shake is a large surface area nightmare for anything that is flammable. So, and then I think the next thing we're going to do, and we've been talking about with the fire department, is actually a free program for everybody to get the 1/8 inch covers on their vents. So actually like just providing them at the fire department so you get that mass collective action. So your neighbor who hasn't done shit isn't screwing you, right, when the fire comes. Because it's not an if for us, it's a win.
Yeah, and Gabrielle, you've probably sat in more HOA board meetings and everything than anyone else in this room except for Chris. And so insurance comes up, right? Can you leverage insurance discussions at HOA meetings into sustainability discussions?
Yeah, insurance is just nuts everywhere. In Colorado, same thing. Insurance providers, insurance doubled or tripled in a single year. And it is something that everyone is top of mind. That's the biggest thing that homeowners will notice. I always come back to that financial case. If you are able to prove that these improvements will reduce costs in the long term, that's your best bet. But it's tough.
And it looks like we have time for about one more question in the back there. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mary from Park City. And this is not a question, it's a comment, so it'll be a good way to wrap it up. Let's see, I live in middle class condos, 180 units, and I've been there for 8 years. And I have learned that the board really appreciates, I have to remind myself, these are volunteer board members. First of all, they don't have time, they have full-time jobs. So they really appreciate it when we do the research and bring the facts to them rather than just say, hey, we need to get EV chargers. Go do it. They really appreciate it. And they've told me when I go and do a bunch of research on what it's going to take to get solar. They've been more receptive to water changes as long as I find the resources for them, rebate programs, et cetera, if I bring them to them. So we're making a little bit of progress with water and going native. Recycling, yeah, we're a little bit of progress. The energy is tough. Just got a bid for a heat pump in my unit last week. I invited all the board members to come over to learn about it. They're responsible for 180 units. Others are going to be asking for this. And, huge, oh, well, no, you can't put any penetration in the wall. And it has to be so many decibels for noise, so they had to tell me all that. But nobody attended, and I invited them all. So the energy's hard. EV chargers, oh my gosh, that is a whole nother can of worms because every unit is so, placed differently from the energy source. And that would be working with the power company to completely change, it'd be a huge amount of money. So, but I'm going to do the research. So they really appreciate it when I do the research. And then, of course, I took over the whole communications committee. And so now I can be part of the newsletter that goes out to educate all of the owners. So you just have to kind of jump in, and they really appreciate it when you do the work. That's what I'm learning, still learning.
Which underscores the point that Gabrielle makes, which is committees are the best way to get started. And so we are out of time here, but we appreciate your attention. Someone else is coming in here in 15 minutes, so we will make ourselves available outside in a few minutes if you want to see us after class. And whatever you wrote down, save it, because when your grandchildren ask, were you there to witness the secret origin? You can say, yes, I did, and here's the proof. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.